We need people, speaking to the choir that do it really well, and we need people who are bold and are able to communicate Christian truth to the broader culture through whatever artistic medium they're good at. So, yeah, we need them both.
But we're going to focus some time and attention today in the first hour, as we do so often. And joining me around the round table is Steve Miller. I might hold up his booklet on a biblical point of view on imagination. By the way, the booklet is free of charge, and we are glad to make it available to you both in printed form or in digital form. And Steve, we're going to be talking about the arts today, and of course, we never let me do anything on the arts without adult supervision, so I'm always glad you're here as well.
I'm glad you count me as an adult. I don't know. Yeah, we're excited to talk to Steve Taylor today, so tell us a little about the intro there.
Yeah, Steve Taylor, of course, is the voice that we're going to be hearing for this next hour, and he is an individual, really has earned the moniker of Renaissance Man. He has garnered a Grammy, Billboard, Telly, Addy, and Dove Awards and nominations, has sold over 1 million albums, garnered at least 2 Grammy nominations. Again, you can see he's the only artist to twice win the Billboard Music Video Awards. Also a record producer, also a writer and director. We have a fairly lengthy bio there as well, but brings a lot to the table, which we'll be talking about, but serves currently as filmmaker in residence at Lipscomb University. And Steve Taylor, thank you for being with us today here on Point of View.
Thank you both. It's nice to be with you.
I might mention that, again, Steve Miller usually is on the other side of the glass as my producer, but Steve, because of your artistic background, I thought it would be great to, again, talk about how Christians think about the arts.
Yeah, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. And just on a personal note, I love your music. I was at a concert of yours in Dallas some time ago. It was
long time ago.
On the Fritz tour, and you signed my vinyl record for me. It was great. Yeah, and I love the music. I love how it challenges norms, how it challenges conventions, makes us think deeply and differently about some of our Christian convictions. And personally, I really like the punk and the new wave sound that you had, certainly in your early years. And I've read that you've been called anything from the evangelical rock's court jester by Newsweek to a gospel Elvis Costello by USA Today, and here's one of my faves, a satanic influence upon the lives of young people by evangelist Bob Jones III. So
yes, that's right. Yes,
we'll take the good with the bad, or the good with the ill-informed, as the case may be. But
right.
I would love for you just to talk to our listeners a little bit about your story. Tell us about what. Talk about the origins. First of all, where you came from, born in California, moved to Denver, and then we'll get into a little bit of how you began on your musical journey. So you grew up as the son of a Baptist minister just outside of Denver. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
And my parents were. My dad was a member of a kind of a more progressive Baptist denomination, and he was a conservative guy in a kind of a more liberal denomination. So that was always interesting to watch that unfold. And he was pretty outspoken about what he believed, and if he thought his denomination was making an error theologically, he didn't have any problem sending letters to every pastor in the denomination to speak his mind. So it was interesting growing up around that, because my parents were fairly conservative, but they were also very consistent between what they preached and the way they lived. When I got to my teenage years and I was supposed to rebel, I wasn't exactly sure what I was supposed to rebel against. So I never went through any big rebellious stage. But I did end up going to a pretty radical university, the University of Colorado at Boulder, for college. And I was a music major and a film minor. And around that same time, I was also serving as a youth pastor for my dad's church. I was supposed to fill in for 6 months until they got a new one, and I filled in for 5 years.
Wow.
And so the difference between what I was trying to communicate, biblical truths I was trying to communicate to my youth group, and what I was experiencing every day on campus at Colorado University was pretty wide. And around that time was when I was introduced to punk rock and new wave music, primarily coming over from Britain. And I really liked the music, and I also liked the way that it engaged with contemporary issues. And I thought, well, it would be interesting to do a sound like that, but and also engage with issues from a Christian perspective. I was not afraid of satire, so I used a lot of satire, and it felt like also a good way to bridge what I was trying to communicate with my youth group in a more contemporary fashion, I guess.
I think it's so interesting that you didn't come from, I think I read somewhere, you said, I never had a chip on my shoulder. It was not like I was raised in some sort of environment with blinders and a hypocritical environment. I need to, as you say, rebel against that. You don't know what am I going to rebel against, And yet God gave you this open, that sounds to me like your household was fairly open to various things, didn't have a very strict view of what was acceptable in the way of the arts. I guess, is that a fair statement?
Yeah. I think they were, my parents were fairly conservative, but they were more open to kind of what was going on in the mainstream culture. And they gave me a pretty wide berth to explore things. And so that helped as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of your early influences, I think, is, if I remember correctly, was The Clash, right?
That's right. Yeah. This band, The Clash from England, were a big influence, probably the main one. And they were very outspoken on issues, and most of their songs were issue oriented.
Yeah.
And I just really liked the way they handled, they would tackle issues. They certainly tried to live out what they were singing about. And so I thought that was admirable. They weren't particularly good at giving hope. And but as a Christian, we believe we have ultimate hope in Jesus. And so that was where I thought, well, maybe I could, point things out that are wrong, both in the world and in the church, but also offer hope as well. And I think one of the reasons I got called a satanic influence by Bob Jones is because I wrote a song called "We Don't Need No Color Code."
Yeah, you did.
Because Bob Jones had a policy at the time of no interracial dating,
right?
Which I think would be a pretty hard thing to justify using scripture.
Yeah,
so that was where that song came from, and I don't think they were particularly happy.
And Steve, for just a minute, maybe we can get a little bit of your musical journey. I mean, Continental Singers and working with Newsboys, and I don't know that you can summarize it quickly, but I'll give you a chance at it.
Right. So yes, I actually was. I don't typically lead with the Continental Singers. That wasn't particularly my style of music. But
exactly. Yeah, well, that's why I was having fun with it, because it's about as wide as you can imagine, right?
Yes, I traveled with them to Poland during the Solidarity era, and that was, I was offered an opportunity to go there, and it's like, well, that's too good of an opportunity to pass up. And then was started recording my own music right out of college, and got a recording contract with Sparrow Records, and did about 3 or 4 albums for Sparrow and Myrrh. And then had an opportunity to form a rock band called Chagall Guevara that was precipitated my move to Nashville. And we got signed to MCA Records. It was a big deal, but the record wasn't particularly successful. And we were still more successful than all their other unsuccessful rock bands. So they wanted us to do a second album. And we did not want to be with MCA anymore. So we toughed it out for a year, and then the band ended up breaking up. But that's what got me to Nashville. And that's when I started producing. So some of the Newsboys albums with songs like Shine and Breakfast, I produced those, and then also wrote the lyrics for their first 3 or 4 kind of hit albums, and then produced a song that your listeners would probably be familiar with, a song called Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer.
Oh yeah.
If I played the song and people have never heard it, I know they're either raised by Amish parents or they've never stopped at TJ Maxx, because otherwise you can't avoid that song, and it's
I love it.
arguably more popular now than it was even when it came out.
Isn't that amazing?
That sound was I remember that the Sixpence. There was a group also called the Sundays. I don't know if you remember them. They kind of had a similar sound. And I'm going to go back just a little bit to we spoke about at the end of the last segment about the Clash and other bands like that, and you made a great point that they were big on questions but kind of short on the answers. And I loved about them. I mean, when I was in college, Combat Rock was just between that.
A good album.
Yeah, between that and your stuff and Terry Scott Taylor with Daniel Amos and stuff was just kind of always going on in my head. I love the way that they faced some of the issues going on in the culture, but it was a letdown, right? Because at the end of the day, they weren't necessarily providing answers, and that's a tough. It's a tightrope when you walk that as a Christian, isn't it?
It is, yes. You're always trying to avoid. Part of the reason for putting things in a musical setting is it's easier for people to kind of take it in, and you don't want to come off too preachy or anything like that. And that's part of the challenge of when I got into filmmaking is Christian films at the time tended to be pretty simplistic kind of salvation stories. There's nothing wrong with that, but those are hard to depict on screen. An interchange of heart is a hard thing to depict, and so I preferred movies. There's a movie called Tender Mercies that I really love, and if you'll remember in that movie, Robert Duvall's character becomes a Christian early on, and that's when everything starts going wrong for him, and and that's where he manages to hold on to his faith despite all these things going wrong. And I thought that was a more true depiction of the Christian life than, a story where someone becomes a Christian and everything starts magically going right. And so I've kind of always tended towards stories like that I felt offered hope, but also were based in reality.
It sounds to me a little bit like reading the book of Ecclesiastes. I mean, there's every reason to hope, but it tells you straight up that there's a lot of vanity going on. There's a lot of things that appear to be pointless. I mean, you started off right out of the gate with "I Want to Be a Clone," which funny thing. I was looking that up because I wanted to refamiliarize myself with it, and I looked it up on Amazon, and right below it was a book called "I Want to Be a Zookeeper." I thought, I don't know, there's some connection there, but
there's some connection there, right?
So this EP, 6 songs. I remember thinking, I've never heard anything like this. This is really, really amazing. And then you went on with Meltdown and On the Fritz. And then you went on a production work. You mentioned Sixpence doing their stuff. And they did a version of There She Goes, right?
That's right. Yeah, that was their second hit single, right?
That was, I read that and I thought, because when the Laws, who did that originally, came to town, I saw them in Dallas back in the early 90s. My goodness.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a band that kind of imploded like many of them did.
Right.
But if I think of you, a lot of what you do, I like to say, you like to poke the bear a little bit. But I think you do it with a desire for perhaps reparation, as in repairing, and a desire to build up, in the way that Erasmus wrote the book In Praise of Folly, right? Looking at the insanity and the absurdity of that. Is that a fair statement that you like to poke the bear? Come on, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily seeking controversy, but it somehow seemed to find me in a lot of things that I did. And part of it's because people the bear doesn't like to be poked. And one of the things I got a lot from fellow Christians is like, why are you airing our dirty laundry for the rest of the world to see? And I'm like, oh, they see it. They just think you don't see it. So I'm not airing out anything. They just think that we're clueless and that we don't realize how how bad it is when we refuse to recognize, the sin can be propagated by the church.
Yeah. Steve Taylor with us, and of course, Steve Miller in studio. Steve, for just a minute, you mentioned the idea of satire, and of course, people now that everything from watching the Veggie Tales, and of course, we mentioned Dead Sea Squirrels, to Babylon Bee and the rest. It seems like that is a genre or a style that's being used more and more, and that was something that you sort of stumbled onto early on, didn't you?
Yes. So I liked to defend the use of satire by pointing back to Scripture. And, you see it in when Elijah and the prophets of Baal had their showdown, and the prophets of Baal aren't getting anywhere. And Elijah, he starts poking the bear, well, maybe you just need to shout a little louder. Maybe your God's asleep. When Jesus uses analogies like you strain at a gnat and swallow a camel, or take the log out of your own eye before you remove the splinter in your brother's eye. I just thought there was enough in Scripture where people would understand, well, that's still a valuable and valid way to communicate today, even from a Christian perspective.
Again, I think that's been very useful. And by the way, I might just mention a couple of things. Steve Miller, I mentioned his whole booklet that we have made available on Imagination. I might mention one that I've edited that is oftentimes used in Christian schools, Arts, Media, and Culture. That one would cost you, but the booklet is available free of charge. If you find yourself saying, well, I'd like to know a little bit more about Steve Taylor or Lipscomb University or a number of others before the hour is up, we'll talk about some of the things he's teaching students there as well. One of the reasons we do these from time to time is because we believe that Christians should be in the arts, whatever particular art form we might be talking about, how important it is for us to encourage the next generation to see that as a viable calling and ministry as well. So I hope that this would be of help to you. If you know somebody that might benefit from some of this conversation today with Steve Taylor, you can maybe click on that red button that says watch or listen. Pass it on to them as well. Steve Taylor, as we mentioned before, is a record producer, musician, writer, director of films, which we're going to get in just a minute, filmmaker in residence at Lipscomb University. But Steve Miller, my producer in studio today. And Steve, again, we've got all sorts of questions, especially given the fact that we were talking about music and then film.
And then film. Yeah, Steve, I think of you, and I mentioned poking the bear and all that, not to make too much of that, but a bit of a disruptive influence in a good way. I kind of think of you as the Banksy of Christian music. I don't know.
Well, that's high praise. Thank you.
Disturbing the comfortable and comforting the disturbed. Do you see that as something that's carried over into your film work as well?
Yes. Films are, of course, harder to make and more expensive, and so they tend to take a lot longer. But the first movie I made was we used to call them black and white buddy movies, where it was the tale of two churches, and the Christian singer Michael W. Smith played the associate pastor of a big suburban mega church.
Wow.
And he gets called down to that church is supporting a urban, primarily black church, and so he brings the pastor of that church up to speak to the congregation, and the black pastor is getting fed up with all talk and no action, and says something that gets Michael in trouble, and so he ends up getting sent to work at the urban church against his will. And of course, in all those types of movies, you got two people who don't like each other, and by the end, they figure out a way to get along. And so that movie, I think, was prescient in many ways. It was a little controversial at the time too, but I think it was a valuable look at why is it that Sunday mornings are still the most segregated hour of the week, and what can we do to help change that?
Yeah.
And then the follow-up movie was really controversial. It was based on Donald Miller's best-selling memoir, Blue Like Jazz.
There we go.
And
yes. More people know that one for anyone. Yes.
Yes, right. Yeah. So in that one, the actual story is Don Miller grew up in suburban Houston and went to Southern Baptist Church. And in his 30s, he moved to Portland, Oregon, and decided to audit classes at this nearby college called Reed College in Portland, Oregon, which the Princeton Review once called the most godless campus in America. And And while he was there auditing classes, he discovered there were some fellow Christians on campus, but they were all afraid of being outed. And so he tells about that experience and what it was like. And the highlight of the book for most people was during the end of year big party celebration where it's just, drugs and alcohol and all kinds of debauchery going on. They built a confession booth and they dressed up like monks, and all these kind of drunk reed partygoers lined up to confess their sins, thinking that that's how it was going to go down. And instead, Don and his fellow Christians on campus kind of came out of the closet and said, we're actually Christians, and we're sorry for things that have been done in the name of Christ that aren't Christ-like. And it was a really powerful moment in the book. And so I wanted to take that moment and turn it into a movie and end the movie with that powerful scene. And so we ended up making that movie. That was probably about 2012 is when it came out. And that was very controversial because it was not a family movie. When we think of Christian films, we usually think of family entertainment. I didn't see how I could tell that story in a realistic way at the most godless campus in America. Maybe it wouldn't have to be R-rated, but it was probably going to at least be PG-13.
Yeah.
And I thought, in my opinion, if you read the Bible, it's not always a very family-friendly book either. And so I thought that would probably be something that at least adult Christians would embrace, and that turns out not so much. So it was not a particular success. It debuted at the South by Southwest Film Festival, so it got some good notices. But it alienated a few people too.
Well, I suppose in a way just as well. I hate to say it that way. I mean, maybe it's going to bring in the people that need to see it. I loved it. I thought it was strong. I thought it was heavy hitting, and it's just the sort of film I like, but that's, maybe that's partially my taste, and maybe not, but I thought it did what it, I guess, quote, needed to do. I think of I'm always reminded of Flannery O'Connor when I hear people talk about how things ought to be, in the words of one of the defunct radio stations in our area, safe and fun for the whole family. Her writing, she said, sometimes when you're preaching to people, when you're talking to people who are hard of hearing, you have to yell, that sort of thing. And I think in a way that's what you've chosen to do. And kudos, that's me talking. I think a lot of people appreciated it, but you cannot do anything. Like with Chagall Guevara, you didn't find that to be commercially successful. But at the end of the day, you're probably glad that you did it.
I also pulled up the one from New York Times where it says the Bible Belt goes to college is how the New York Times described it. So,
right. Yes. Well, all that to say, now I'm working with Mike Nawrocki, co-creator of VeggieTales, to amend for Blue Light Jazz. No,
you're doing your penance. But, good for you.
That's right. I'm doing my penance. But that's been a total blast. And one of the things I loved about VeggieTales, which I think most of us love, is that it was full of biblical truth, but it was so funny and so much fun. And those silly songs still stand up. I could throw a rock and hit someone right now who could sing the Hairbrush song.
Yep.
It's just it's had a really deep cultural resonance, and of course, not only kids but parents and now college students, and it's just gone very deep into the culture. And Mike is someone who I've loved and gotten to work with before on some of their prior projects. So when he told me about this new project and asked me if I'd want to be involved, I jumped at the chance. And so we're very happy with the way that one's turned out. And
we just had him on, I don't know, was it a couple of weeks ago? And I was so excited. I was telling people we're going to have Larry the Cucumber on the show.
That's right.
I mean,
he's like the world's nicest guy.
It's something that I wouldn't have thought when it came out that it would become such a phenomenon, but it certainly did. And I think the fact that you are involved in projects that range all the way from Blue Like Jazz to Meltdown at Madame Tussauds to VeggieTales says something about your creative your creativity and why you do what you do.
Well, we're all working for the same goal. We just have different roles to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the questions I think a lot of people might ask is, if I want to go into the arts, what to do. And certainly we want to mention that you are teaching at Lipscomb University. That's not the only place where you could learn about the arts. But Steve, wouldn't you agree that in the old days, since some of us are a little bit older around the table, it was hard to get an album out? Now you can do all sorts of things through the internet. It used to be hard to get a book published. Now it's pretty easy. Most of the people that actually get started are doing podcasts and videocasts and things of that nature. And so in some respects, the technology is not the hurdle, but you still need a biblical point of view, and you still need creativity and need to know how to tell a story.
Yeah, that's really well put, Kirby. The real barrier is the barrier of excellence.
Yes.
I had a mentor, Bob Briner, who wrote a book called Roaring Lambs.
Bob. Yeah.
Is that right? Well,
yeah.
he was a great guy and a great mentor. And you know, his point was, if you're not ready to be excellent, don't bother. And and that the reason a lot of Christian media doesn't have a broader impact on the culture is just because it's not good enough. So one of the things that I've loved being at Lipscomb in Nashville, which is a Christian university, but we've set up a college of entertainment and the arts that's very it's multidisciplinary. So in most colleges or universities, you've got like a theater program, but that they never talk to the film program, and they never talk to the music program, and who never talks to the arts program. And we've set up a situation where we've got a really great film program and a really great animation program run by the Bancroft brothers, two Disney animators.
Wow.
Got a fantastic theater program, but our film programs have to work with theater students because usually, you know, college-age films, it's not they're not bad because they don't know how to use a camera. They're bad because the writing and the acting are terrible.
Yeah.
And so we really try to have everybody working together.
In studio with me, Steve Miller. Only got a few minutes left, but I thought we'd get back to this idea of kind of a Christian philosophy of the arts.
You bet. Steve, there's a book out there by yet another Steve, Steve Turner, called Imagine, a Vision for Christians in the Arts.
Yes.
If you may be familiar with that. In that book, he quotes T-Bone Burnett, and I love this quote. T-Bone says, if you're a Christian, you can write songs, a Christian singer, you can write songs about the light, you can write songs about what you see by the light. And that's what I do. That's what he would say. And I think that may be a good bit of advice to people who go into the arts and are struggling with, do I just do good Christian art, or do I do Christian art or just good art? You mentioned earlier the problem sometimes with production value is not that you don't have a good DP or an audio engineer or a cinematographer. You don't have a good story, and you really don't have good acting.
Right. Yes. That's funny you mentioned that book. That book was actually birthed in my living room.
Oh, that's right.
Steve Turner came and spoke to a bunch of Nashville-based artists, and we turned it into a pamphlet, and then he took the pamphlet and expanded it into a book. So,
there you go.
I now remember reading that, yeah.
Full of good advice, and we need both. We need people, speaking to the choir that do it really well, and we need people who are bold and are able to communicate Christian truth to the broader culture through whatever artistic medium they're good at. So we need them both.
Yeah, we need excellence, and I have worked in both Christian theater and film, and in secular theater and film, probably more in secular, because there's just more out there. And I have found that there's not always. There seems to be less of a concern with Christians doing theater and film to do it well. This is an overstatement, but in general, the idea is, do you love Jesus and do you want to do a show? And this is not. I mean, you wouldn't ask someone to get up on stage and sing at a church service if they, let's just say, we're not equipped to do so. I mean, and yet sometimes as actors we find that it's okay. You just need to love Jesus. I would like to ask you, and I want to not be too cynical about this. Well, I ask you though, what your advice would be to Christians who are involved in the arts and who want to go out there and to dive into a secular culture and to go to universities like Don Miller did and do things that are meaningful and where they can become salt and light.
Right. Well, like we said, you need excellence, but man, you really need the body of Christ, fellow Christians, to be in fellowship with and supporting you. And they really need to go hand in hand. And people that I admire who are Christians who are working in the mainstream, they almost invariably are people who not only have a deep faith, but have a deep connection to the church. And we need them both.
Yeah.
In terms of maybe the students, if somebody were to enroll at Lipscomb University or somewhere else, because there are quite a number of programs that are there for individuals who are going into the arts, you might share a little bit about that, because you were talking about the diversity of the curriculum, and I think that's important. Sometimes we go too quickly into whether it's journalism or the arts or even into science or other areas, and I think a broader curriculum is actually something that would be more advantageous for a future musician, a future film producer, don't you think?
Absolutely. One of the things I love about Lipscomb is, most 18-year-olds I know, they know they want to be in the creative field. They're just typically not exactly sure what it is. And so that's why we really stress that they get a broad overview of the creative arts, are able to try different things, collaborate with people in other disciplines. But then also, they're taking Bible classes as well and getting a solid foundation for their faith. And I think the two need to go hand in hand.
Steve, how would you describe or could you comment on some of the biggest challenges for you personally and artistically through the years that you've faced and that might help others in similar struggles?
Well, in some ways, we're living in a really good time because, 30, 40 years ago, we had to make the case for why the arts were even important within a Christian content. Mm-hmm. And I think that's largely changed. There's probably still some pockets of resistance, but in general, I think the church recognizes that we need the arts and we need excellence. I think there's still a hesitation or a tendency to equate Christian with family, and I am all in favor of quality family entertainment. In fact, the movie that I just produced stars Tony Hale and premiered at the Toronto Film Festival. It's called Sketch. It's actually at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right now and should be coming out this summer.
Oh, that's awesome.
But and it's not it's not a Christian movie, excuse me, but it's a movie with deep resonance and has a lot to say about grief and how kids process grief. And it's also really funny and action-packed. I think we call it a cross between Inside Out and Jurassic Park. But I think it's important that as Christians, we're also able to create just really good quality entertainment for mainstream audiences as well, and to do it with excellence. So it's a good time to be creating things, and it's I think an important time for Christians to be exercising their faith in the public square through the arts.
Yeah. Could you mention that again? The name of the film that Tony Hale's in?
The movie is called Sketch.
Sketch. Okay.
Sketch. Yeah.
Okay.
It should be coming out hopefully in July nationwide.
Tony Hale's a great guy. I met him once. We had lunch with some people, and that was about the time Arrested Development was taking off. And
yes.
I think he's fabulously funny and a strong believer. So that's exciting.
Yes.
Good stuff.
That's right. He's one of my favorite actors and one of my favorite people. And I can't wait for people to see this movie.
Awesome. I will do that.
Might just mention again, we'll be watching for Sketch. And again, I think it was February 12th when we talked about Dead Sea Squirrels, since we did mention that. That's there. Right. So you can learn a little bit more about that and go back and find that on our website.
Yeah, that's right. It's streaming on Minnow TV, and I think we just released episodes 6 and 7, so there's 13 episodes in all. And I got to say, it's full of biblical truth, but it is genuinely funny. It's really funny. So I hope people check it out.
Are you doing any voices on this one?
I am both a talking donkey and the Apostle Paul. So, typecasting.
Well, there we go. So again, if you did not hear the interview, that was February 12th on Point of View. Just go to pointofview.net and find that. If you find yourself saying, well, I'd like to contact Steve Taylor a little bit more about him, click on that button that says Facebook. That will take you to facebook.com/Steve Taylor Presents. There's a way in which you can connect up with him. And Steve, thank you for letting us connect up with you and putting you through the ringer of trying to talk about everything from your background to your musical journey, your film work, and philosophy of arts all in 1 hour. So it's been great to have you on the program.
Thank you, Kirby. Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Steve, thank you for sitting across from me. I guess next hour we'll let you get on the other side of the glass. Sure. But we've talked about this before. We certainly do talk about this idea of apologetics, the need for you not only to know how to articulate a biblical point of view, but to defend a biblical point of view. But sometimes a lot of apologetics is left hemisphere, logical, linear, but there's another part of that is right hemisphere and cultural apologetics, and that's why we've talked about this issue of the arts. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you again have appreciated all that we've talked about today, and don't forget that if you would like more information about what we're talking about, you can find it at the website pointofview.net. That's all we have for today. We look forward to seeing you next time right here on Point of View Highlights.